Welcome, everyone. This is our podcast session. I'm Patrick Anderson with EV Explored. We have a YouTube channel that focuses on EVs, doing EV reviews, as well as EV charging, which is why we're here. And we have some guests here today because we're going to talk about EV charging, the landscape now, where it's at now, where it came from, and where it's going in the future. So we're going to do our introductions and then dive into a discussion to let you guys know all about that. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Dan Larson, Senior Sales Engineer with Autel Energy.
Yeah, Chris Kaiser. This says Sona Energy Solutions, but we recently spun out a own and operate company called Plug-in. So I'm the president of Plug-in. Still work with Sona. Sona installs the stations. Plug-in operates the stations. So a little bit of everything.
Well, I'm glad you guys could both join us. We do have one empty seat. We're going to have another gentleman join us in about 30 minutes, I think. But we'll go ahead and dive in. We're here at the EV Charging Summit. So there's as you guys may hear from the microphones, a lot of buzz about EV charging. We think we're like deep into this EV charging future, but we are still sort of in the infancy. So, do you want to explain, Dan, where you think the EV charging landscape has come and where it's at now?
Yeah. I mean, it moves so quickly that 1 year in this industry is equivalent to 10 years in any other industry. It seems like it's always been volatile, and I'm sure it will continue to be. But honestly, there's been a lot of negative press around the future of EV charging and all that, but we're not seeing any slowdown at all on our end. So, and I think a lot of we're not a CPO, we're a hardware manufacturer. But I think a lot of the CPOs, they're probably seeing the same thing. So, there's some uncertainty about grants and incentives, but that doesn't make up the industry. There's so many private companies that are, they're seeing the benefits of electrifying their fleets, hosting EV charging for their customers, loyalty programs, all of that. Not to mention multifamily, and all the other potential verticals that are out there. So, it's been so much fun to see where it was, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, versus where it is today, and it's continuing to grow, and it's been a lot of fun.
It's definitely changing quite a bit. Do you want to talk about what you've seen over the past few years, and Chris?
Yeah, I would just echo those sentiments. We don't target in any specific market or region. We go wherever our customers go. So we work a lot with key accounts. Our first fast charger site was with Wendy's. So Wendy's has locations all over the country. And so we say, all right, well, where are the best incentives to work with? And so we target all regions that make sense, and we target all customers. And I say, if the chargers get used, then we want to work with you. We don't want to put in chargers in the back of a shopping mall that never get used, or they're not lit up well. Anywhere there's utilization. So public fast charging at grocery stores or fast food places or multifamily residential. But yeah, I would echo Dan's comments that the national sentiment around EV is kind of up and down, but I think customer sentiment is people want charging. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it continue to grow. You mentioned something, and I think this is maybe where the EV industry is evolving a little bit. And I think before it was people didn't necessarily know where to put EV charging stations. Do you see customers are sort of understanding more about what EV owners want and what works for them to get a good return on investment of when they do put in a charger?
So our pitch to our site host clients or companies that want to put in chargers is, let's start with a pilot project, and if you want to pick a site that's near your headquarters, let's do that, or we can tell you where the best incentives are. And so we'll find a site where we can install at hopefully no cost, because the utility will pay for all the make ready, which is all the infrastructure up to a concrete mounting pad. And now some utilities have programs where they'll do all the make ready and they will pay for the hardware. And so then our job as a installer is to figure out how we can maximize the incentive dollars and deliver a project that gives them the best project at the lowest cost. And so I always advise, if anyone's on the fence, is, well, let's start small. Let's put it in, let's see how it works, and then let's expand from there.
And I'm assuming that part of that planning is future proofing, so that if they do start small, they can, expand in the future.
Yes and no. I mean, I love the idea of future proofing, but oftentimes it bumps up against reality. Whereas the utility says we're only going to give you a transformer for what you're putting in today, and if you want to expand in the future, you're going to have to upgrade your transformer. But then there's other programs like I think ComEd in New York where they will say, all right, we'll incentivize up to X 10% future proofing, which means you can upsize your transformer. But again, it's all about working within the programs, the utilities, and understanding what the best project we can deliver, and then doing that.
And I'm assuming setting expectations for that customer so that they know they can expand, like just letting them know like what's possible in the future. But now going back with Autel, I think this is part of where you guys can help people understand. Like you have a portfolio, so they may come in. I'm sure you guys had the home people that are like, "You guys sell home chargers? Can I get a 350 kilowatt charger at home?" Like, that may not be the best solution. But I'm assuming business owners go through the same type of thought process. They may want too much or too little based on where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, our main thing is just really having as flexible of a product portfolio as possible. So that way, maybe somebody is wanting to put in a couple fast chargers. They speak with the utility company, and the utility says, we can only supply you with two chargers at 100 kilowatts each today, and there's a 30-week lead time on transformer upgrades. So, that's why we have like modular solutions. So that way they can deploy a charger at the max output of what they can be supplied from the utility side today. But then in the future, if the utility upgrades that transformer, now, they can look at their site utilization and maybe, they want to put in higher power now. They don't have to replace the charger. It's just a matter of installing additional power modules in the existing products and upgrading the output at that point. So we have that on the DC side, and then with our AC chargers, we run into a lot of situations of maybe there's a different brand of charger in there that is old, defective, no longer working, but maybe it was a dual port 32 amp charger. They could purchase our dual port 80 amp, and then we've got dip switches so they can dial it down. So that way, if there's already conduit trench underneath the parking lot going to that charger, they don't need to undo all of that. They can just rip the old one out, put our dual port 80 amp in there, dial each port down to 32 amps, and it's going to be fully functional at that point. But then at a later time, as the onboard charger acceptance rate continues going up on vehicles, maybe a couple years from now, they're going to be like, okay, we want the full 80 amps out of each port now. And then it's just a matter of upgrading the cabling to the charger.
And it could just like be waiting so that it coincides with when they repave the parking lot. Now's the time to do the conduit, not just randomly we're going to dig a trench. So
exactly,
yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Now, you guys have been in providing EV chargers for a while. How do you see your product portfolio has evolved? Because I know that it's a new industry. You guys are learning just as everybody else is. What have you guys learned that you're putting in today's products to make them better for the future?
Yeah, really, there's a lot of aspects, but we really just try and listen to obviously our customers and the market needs. So, because every time that we get a request from somebody, do you guys offer this feature? If we don't offer it today, it goes into a bucket of, okay, here's the things that people are requesting. Do you have battery storage? Well, no, today we don't do that, but we have, partners that do, so we want to be the connector that connects our partners with the products that they need, even if it's something that we don't offer today, but then we'll put that into development for something that we will offer. So, payment needs, charger features, integrations with, additional OCPP networks, as well as maintenance capabilities too. So, customizable alerts to our back end related to, maybe in Texas where it's really hot, one operator down there might realize that, okay, on the really hot summer days, we notice that when the connector temperature is, hitting a certain threshold, then we got a, driver complaint that the connector was too hot to touch. So they can actually set a customizable alert through our back end so that alert, stops the session prematurely so the connector doesn't get too hot, something like that. And we always try and be part of the design phase so that you can put in, a canopy and that type of thing if there are, if it's directly exposed to sun in a hot region. Yeah, we just really try and listen to what our customers want, what the market is asking for, and we deliver those products.
Now, Chris, I'm assuming you're dealing with like a lot of diverse businesses. How do you adapt what they want versus what you think may be the best thing versus what the EV driver, like all of those different priorities? How do you balance all of that?
Yeah, it's a good question because there's a lot of things I can say. But from a sales perspective and a solution sales, so oftentimes, like I was just, I think I spoke to Dan about this. I was at a office last week, and it was fleet. It's a pharmaceutical company. They've converted their entire fleet to EV. They have some dumb level 2 that are non-networked, and as what happens, people put those in 10 years ago, and then they realize, hey, having network chargers has advantages because you can set time limits. Even at an office where they're not paying for it, you still want networked chargers. And so I was with they were an EV fleet company, so they want to sell the EVs, and they bring in charging as part of that. And so I was helping them out with the charging solution. But of course, every company, whether it's an office or it's a condo building, condos are the worst. Everyone has someone in the building who's their EV expert, and they're always like, "Oh yeah, they're the EV expert. They'll tell you what we need." And I'm like, "All right, they're going to talk, and then I'm going to say, okay, I hear you. Here's another way we can achieve this." And so, from the Autel Energy side, we craft solutions, and we want to craft the best solution that meets their needs for their budget. Then the hard part is they never really tell you their budget up front. They make you play this guessing game, and well, give me options 1, 2, and 3. And this office, they wanted to replace their dumb chargers in their parking deck, and then they had an outdoor parking area, and they wanted 2 180 kW fast chargers in their outdoor parking area. And I'm just like really? So a lot of it is just level setting and providing ideas to them and understanding like, what are you really trying to achieve? And trust me to deliver a solution that meets those goals. But it's complicated. There's like, for instance, this site had 40 amp breakers, so 32 amp chargers, and they want faster chargers. They want 80 amp, or they want to go up to a 48 amp charger, which is a 60 amp breaker. I'm like, well, we can replace the breaker, but we need to know what size wire was pulled because we need to make sure that's adequate. We might have to pull new wire. So it's just, there's so much that goes into it. But, to give, Autel their due, the nice thing about Autel is I'm going to propose probably the Autel Pro, which goes up to 80 amp all the way down to, I don't know, 6 amps. And then I'm also going to propose the 40 kW DC fast charge units. So they're like their micro DC fast charge because they need a faster charging solution. And it's like, well, you say you want an 80 amp, but do the EVs you use, they have an onboard AC DC converter, and those typically top out around 10 kilowatts. So you're telling me you want 19.2 kilowatts, but you don't really know what that means or why, or even if your vehicles can use that. But if we put in these faster DC fast charge units, you can get the full 40 kW rating. And so it's really understanding what they're asking for and then helping them understand, that there's a better way to do it than what they think.
And I'm assuming that you filter a lot of that type of information up to Autel as well, so they're understanding what your customers are wanting so that they can provide you with the products to help them.
Yeah, I'll call Dan. I'll be like, hey, what's the best way to achieve this? Or the one of their units is, or they'll have new products coming to market, and they're like, well, if the timing is this, this could be a new product. And a lot of people don't realize how long these EV charging projects, like, it's a 2-year sales cycle from when you first have the conversation to putting in, say, fast chargers. But really, if you're putting in a new level 2 project, a lot of people think level 2 is just easier, but it can be harder. It can be just as hard as fast charger projects because you have to be more creative because you often are working off existing infrastructure, whereas fast charging is always new infrastructure. So I know I need a transformer, I need power distribution, and I know I need chargers. And yes, I have to work with the utility to get that. But if I'm in an old, multifamily and the electrical panel is all the way over there that they want me to pull off of, it's just as hard to get electricity for a level 2 than if I just plopped a new, transformer for a DC fast charge. So it's just, these projects are easier and harder at the same time than everyone thinks.
Now, as we're transitioning, getting more EV chargers out there, a lot of people, we always talk about like how many DC fast chargers are in the ground. That's like the biggest number that everybody talks about. We talk about how many people have charging at home. where do you guys both see the next few years of like where we should be focusing on EV charging that we're not focusing on?
So we recently were reviewing the OHMS report, which is, they analyze the entire market. We were seeing obviously a large increase in the demand for multifamily housing. And this report really concludes that as well. So multifamily is, like residential charging has kind of plateaued. People who need residential chargers now have them. But the multifamily industry is really still underserved, and it's needed because so many people are, EV adoption continues increasing, and a lot of the old multifamily buildings still don't have EV charging. So now they're all looking to get solutions, and that's a really growing segment within the industry.
We've talked about that on our channel as well about multifamily dwellings not having EV charging. Do you guys like what are some solutions or what are some options that are out there now or that we need to make that possible?
I think so. A company here at the show, 3V Infrastructure, but also what we're doing with Plugin is finding sites where if they put in enough chargers and if enough of their residents have EVs, then it's like, all right, we'll pay for everything, and we'll just cut you a check every month to cover the electricity cost and then some type of revenue share, and you don't have to pay anything. And finding real estate owners and partners who are open to that, and you say that, and it's like, oh, free charging, who wouldn't do that? But it's really hard to get to the right person who has the signing authority who can sign, because you typically want to do a 10-year contract if you're going to front all the infrastructure. And it's often hard to get to that person who also has the pain point around, hey, we're losing leases because our tenants say they're finding another apartment complex because they drive an EV and they can't charge it at all. So you have to have the person with the right level of authority to sign these contracts, but also who has the pain point around realizing that they need to provide this amenity. And I think we're just at this inflection point where I think you had your early adopters who just liked EVs, and so they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to put charging in our apartment complexes. But I feel like we're getting closer and closer to where the percentage of EV drivers is going up, and that percentage of residents is going to have more power over the decision makers at the apartment complexes. So it's a long-winded answer, but I think if you come up with creative solutions to say, well, we can provide charging for your property at no cost, why not? And so it's the retrofit, and then it's also the new construction. So getting into these communities and saying, hey, put me on your new construction spec so I don't have to go through a long sales cycle every time you guys build a new property, and then I have to talk to the architect and electrical engineer and electrical contractor and general contractor. And so just figuring out how you streamline the sales cycle. And I think there's been a lot of reporting over the years with solar, and how if you looked at like traditionally in the solar market and residential solar, it's a pretty large percentage that goes to just like sales. And, if you can streamline some of the sales and outreach and educating the market and just get to where like we just want to focus on putting in chargers for you, that'll help. And we're getting closer there. And I think the attendance at the show demonstrates that there is a lot of interest and it's not slowing down.
Yeah, I know when we got solar at home, it was like the marketing that I know these companies were all spending must have been a tremendous part of their budget. But, we just wanted solar, and we were ready to roll. It's really interesting seeing how things are progressing. Also on the top end side, because I like talking about the residential, I like talking about all of that, but it seems like every time I come to one of these shows, the kilowatt speeds are getting higher and higher. Do you want to talk a bit about what Autel's doing on that side and the challenges of doing that? And I got a follow up probably. I think we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, today we have up to 640 kilowatt charging solution. We also just at CES earlier this year, we launched our all-in-one 480 kilowatt. And then we've got, everything down to 40 kilowatt on the DC side. And then as far as future products, we've got megawatt charging in the works. We also have a new expandable platform that can be like 480, 960, or 1440 kilowatts. And and that can, supply a megawatt charging dispenser, but then also multiple CCS connectors, because a lot of fleets that are heavy duty fleets, they might have medium duty vehicles too. And so when the megawatt charging dispenser is not being used, then they've got CCS ports for the medium duty vehicles as well, or employee vehicles, that type of thing. So we're really just trying to have scalable solutions. We also have distributed DC products coming to market as well. So we're really ramping up on the really high powered stuff, but obviously the timeline and development cycle, and then the project timelines on actually getting those in the ground, permitting, all of that. It all takes a while, but we're speccing that into all of our products are being specced into a lot of projects like that.
I'm excited by the higher speeds, but like I know my car, we have a Mustang Mach-E. It tops out at about 160 kilowatts, which brings up the follow-up question. And I know it's not necessarily something from a manufacturer's perspective, but like I think there's this huge obstacle about consumer education to dealers, to people actually buying the cars. But like, what can we do to help educate people to understand that 640 kilowatts is great, but it's not going to help me out personally? And then of course, why do we need 640 kilowatts if a lot of cars only take 160?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct in that the consumer education aspect needs to be improved for sure. We are doing a lot of things in that area to try and educate consumers, especially, we have our Autel Charge Cloud, so there are some chargers that are operating on our cloud, and, in that we've got our app with instructions. I think a lot of times it comes down to the CSMS software that the charger is being operated on. It's really critical for that software provider to do a really good job of educating their customers. Because sometimes it might be somebody that's never been to that network before. This is their first time. They need good instructions, otherwise they're going to get frustrated. They'll have a bad experience. So there's that aspect. I mean, from a hardware manufacturer standpoint, there's not too much on the hardware training, I think, that's needed, other than the fact that if somebody has a Chevy Bolt,
Bolt users are always brought up in this conversation.
Yeah, it's not going to do them any good to plug into a 300 kilowatt charger. So that aspect, I think that it's going to happen over time as more people are exposed to EVs, but that's probably going to continue being a slow roll.
I'll expand on that a little bit too, in that I think there are both EV manufacturers, auto OEMs, who they want to just tout the top level charge rate because it looks better. But I don't know the Mach-E, I've looked at the charge curve, but it tops out, say, at 160, and then it rapidly kind of goes down. And a lot of EVs do that. And I don't know if the marketing departments at these EV OEMs really care to educate about charge curve. And the same goes for some EV CPOs who might say, oh, we have 300 kW chargers, and they leave it at that because 300 is a nice big number. And they don't say, oh, well, there's like one or two cars on the market that can even charge at that rate. And I think there's some, I don't want to say intentional, but the marketing departments at some of these organizations may not want to educate the consumers because they think, oh, if we just focus on these top line numbers, that's going to help us sell more now. And so it's us in the industry who have to kind of deprogram consumers and say, well, here's reality. And that's challenging.
I'm going to jump in and echo that, because when we lived in Denver, there was a charging station, the closest one to our house. So, I never used it much because I charged at home, but it was a 200 kilowatt charger, but it had 200 amp cables. So it was like,
Don't get me started.
Yeah. So we would top out at 70 kilowatts, and I would complain to them, and they're going, it's your car's fault. I'm like, no, you're labeling this thing wrong. There's like, nobody can get that speed out of that.
Well, we had the Audi e-tron, which is a 400 volt architecture, but the ChargePoint CP250, so a couple of years ago, one of the more popular, if you paired them and you were the only one at the station, they said you'd get 125 kilowatts. And I would only ever get 80 kilowatts, and I couldn't figure it out. And I would ask people at ChargePoint, and they're like, I don't know. And it's because they had a 200 amp cable, so 200 amp times 400 volt architecture, and you get 80 kilowatts. But I'm a mechanical engineer. I know a lot about this industry, but it took me about 6 months of like trying to think of what's going on. So when we buy Autel now, even if we have a 120 kilowatt station, we upgrade to 300 amp cables. Just because we want to deliver 120 kilowatts, whether you're a 400 volt architecture or 800 volt architecture. And so, there's a lot of companies trying to do the right thing, but I think it's also much easier if you just throw a big splashy number on there, but then forget all the asterisks and other details that go along with that.
Yeah, everybody wants the big numbers. We did have another guest join us, so if you want to share microphones and go ahead and introduce yourself. And
Yeah, Anthony Sasai. I'm with Ready Charging. I'm a vice president there, and I lead our software and network division.
welcome. We've been just sort of having a discussion of like where EV charging has been, where it is now, and in the future. I'm trying to think, like, should we bring them up to speed on our questions or throw a new one at you? I think I would like to get your input on one of the things that we were sort of talking about is like, as we're talking about the EV charging landscape future, like there's a lot of talk about, of course, DC fast charging. That's where everybody wants to count the number of posts that are installed. But where do you think we're lacking coverage of charging infrastructure in the future?
I think the infrastructure is building out really nicely. I think the speed is a big component that I think is lacking. Deploying 50 kilowatt charging stations, it just doesn't cut it anymore, because that's where you're seeing 45-minute, 50 to an hour plus wait times of charging versus utilizing some of the high power equipment that we do with Autel. I have an Ionic 5 on the fleet. We use our high power Autels. I have over 200 miles of range in like 9 minutes. It's incredible versus, I know you mentioned the Chevy Bolts. They get brought up a lot because, they are 50 kilowatts. So I think really making sure that the power outputs are as high as you can, that obviously with the grid capabilities, but also future-proofing the hardware as well. Like Autel has the ability to insert more modules. Maybe 150 or 160 kilowatts is okay today, but being able to upgrade that hardware without ripping out a unit or without completely redoing the infrastructure, I think is key.
So we talk a lot about, like the specific, technical details like charging speed and all of that good stuff. But something I'd like to address with specifically you two guys, because you guys do installations, site design and making them more friendly, more accessible. My wife has a disability. She go over there. So we're always looking at that. How do you guys get involved in trying to help the business customer understand like how it needs to be accessible? It doesn't need to be behind the building, out by the dumpster, and those type of things.
Absolutely. I think one of the best pieces of that and how we're able to provide such a good guidance towards that is the fact we're all EV drivers as well. I've driven a Ford Lightning with a trailer on the back. People do not think about trailers on an EV. There's not really any pull-through stations. Thinking of the disability or thinking of the location and how to find it, a lot of those components I feel aren't necessarily thought about with maybe a typical engineering firm. They're looking at the power, the location of a panel, and that's kind of it. And at the end of the day, that's okay to make the unit work, but if you really look at it on a personal case and how is it going to work with the entire industry, how is it going to really affect the driver experience, I think that's really a key component. Utilizing canopies. Everyone with a gas vehicle gets a canopy. They get a pull-through station. Why is that not the same thought process as an EV or an EV site? So I think that's key, and I think really putting yourself in the shoes of all drivers, not just what's easy. It's one thing to be as close as possible to the panel, but that really might not be the best location for a good experience. So I think really looking at it with that lens is very critical.
Yeah, because I know as we do our road trips, it's always interesting, and we do a little bit of like a site review every time we stop and charge, and it's really interesting to see. Some people put us like way out in the middle of nowhere, and then some put us up close to the store, which provides its own drawbacks because then people want to ice those spots.
Yeah.
So it's a really challenging landscape out there for deciding how to put those site designs in. So I appreciate what you guys are doing and helping people understand that.
The other thing on that point is security. So now, like, I'll say terrified, but if someone comes and cuts all our cables, it's very expensive to replace cables on it. In fact, it's about $5,000 for one cable. It's 23-foot, 300 amp cable. And that's just because someone damaged the connector on the CCS connector, but we have to pay it. But if someone cuts all my cables at a site, so the way to mitigate that, I think, is better lighting, security cameras, all the above. So site design is extremely important. Oftentimes, we as service providers or charge station, CPOs, we're limited at what the site tells us. Like you can have your own ideas, but you get with their head of real estate, and they're gonna be like, nope, you're going here, and then you're like, okay. So there's only so much we can control, but obviously the closer to the building you get, the better lighting, the better.
And I know you touched base on security based off of people stealing cables or damaging or vandalizing. But that's something that people have been asking us more and more, just so you guys know, is about security for the drivers. And there's some devices for Teslas now that basically allow people to escape by ejecting the charge cable in those scenarios. So have you seen any, like site owners that are bringing that up as a concern for their customers that are going to be using the chargers?
I would say it's I don't necessarily think it's something that really comes to mind. Granted, a lot of my experience comes at C stores, and it's already very well lit. It's already in a very public location, but I've seen stations that are 3 miles off the expressway in the farthest corner of a Sam's Club parking lot. If you want to charge at 10 p.m. at night, the store is closed. It can get a little sketchy, and it can get, it's one of those things where a gas pump, you've maybe seen someone in your time driving down the expressway with a gas nozzle sticking out of their car. It's happened, right? You can't start an EV while it's actively charging unless you have some of those fail safes or essentially the features to be able to eject the handle. Because if you have to hop out of the car and unplug it and wait a few seconds, I have a Polestar as one of my daily drivers, and I have to hit the button and I have to wait like 5, 6, 7 seconds, and then it releases the cable, and then I can put it back into the holster. You never know what can happen. So I
don't even know if it'd be possible to eject a CCS. Like Tesla controls the car and they control the charging, and that's why they're so good at what they do. We have to find solutions that then work with this, hodgepodge of different players. But I don't even know if that'd be possible.
The company working on, or made the Tesla one, they said they were working on a CCS solution. I'm like, we'll see.
Yeah.
Call me when we can figure out charging reliably 100% of the time, and then we can focus on all these other Spectre Gadget solutions.
All right, you brought up the word reliability. That's something that I find it's interesting because we're not long-term EV owners. We started in 2021. Never really had a ton of like reliability issues, but then we started seeing that creep in and became like a huge issue. I would say in 2024 maybe things have seemed to be getting better. It seems like companies like Autel are learning more about on the equipment side, but also better maintenance that is being done. I'd like to hear all of your input on that. So you want to start with the equipment side?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, really, the remote diagnostics, that's a huge one. What we want to do for anybody operating our chargers is, if there is any downtime, we want to keep it as minimal as possible. So with that, we try and make it so we can remotely diagnose just about every component within the charger. It's not 100% true all the time, but we try and get as many data points through our maintenance backend, so that then our service team, one of the key differentiators between us and I think a lot of the others in the industry is that we're really focusing, we have to have really good service as a hardware provider. Otherwise, there's way too many out there that sell the hardware and then you can never reach them. So we're trying to be different in that aspect. We have an amazing service team, and anybody that operates our equipment, they know how to get a hold of us. They can call us directly. And we will log in remotely, look at all the data, give them tests to do at the site if that's required. But a lot of times we can diagnose, okay, it's likely this part. So then when they're visiting the site, they can bring that part with them. Or a lot of the data that we collect, we can actually see, okay, there was actually a phase imbalance in to the charger. And that's why it set this ground fault or whatever. So, through the telemetry data that we have, you can actually see ground voltage. And so, a lot of times if a charger is setting a ground fault, then we can see through our maintenance backend, okay, we have 50 volts on the ground side. So that means we've got to pour ground to the charger. So that way they know when they get to the site, the tests that need to be done and likely the area that needs to be fixed. So, but we also listen to the input from all of our operators. So we're always collecting that. And then with future firmware versions that there's obviously new firmware that you have to roll into chargers to support new vehicle protocols and all of that all the time. But then with that, we're also, including more diagnostic features, something that maybe nobody had brought it up until last month. But then we put it into our development timeline because we realized that, hey, that's actually a really good, piece of data that our operators, it's going to save them money and increase the uptime of our hardware. So then we develop that, put it out in new firmware to the chargers. And now, that data point is now viewable by not only us, but all of the operators of our chargers as well.
And on the maintenance side, do you guys get involved in that, or are you more installation only?
Yeah, I can kind of even piggyback off of some of Dan's comments. Being able to work together with a company like Autel and get the data of a fault report, it has cut the amount of truck rolls that we've needed to do immensely. Knowing what the problem is through software is amazing, because if I see that it's an e-stop has been pressed, I don't need a truck roll, a master electrician to fix that. That's something as simple as even the driver can do it, or the site owner can do that, right? But if I know that it's a power module failure, or if I know that an internal module has failed, I can send that part with a technician to the site so it's done all at once, versus going to the site, diagnosing the problem, connecting with the OEM, connecting with the CPO, figuring out all these components, and then doing another truck roll. Because if an EV charger is down, it's like closing the doors of your business. And also too, with drivers, if that's your spot and that's your routine location, if that site's down, you might only have 5% battery left, and you maybe think that you can charge there, and then now what?
It's like closing the door to your business, but then the driver can't leave, so he's stuck there at your closed business.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the other components on the reliability side that's really key in my perspective. The connectivity is huge. Being able to utilize a multi-carrier SIM and maybe Wi-Fi or Ethernet together. If Ethernet fails, you have a SIM as a fail-safe, and it's multi-carrier. So if one of the carriers' cell service drops for an hour, it's going right to the next one versus just completely going dark. Because when you have a public station, it is meant to collect revenue just like a business would. If the connectivity goes out, it doesn't have necessarily a fail-safe to just charge a vehicle for free, right? So if that happens, like you mentioned, the site's closed and someone's stuck there if they don't have enough range to continue on. So that, and then just also making sure that all of the remote functionality components for our software, being able to remote start a unit, to be able to power cycle a unit remotely, check the diagnostics, do all these firmware updates remotely, having all of these components, because as you know, a lot of these sites, they're unmanned businesses. 3,000 ports across the country, they're generally just paired with another business. That other business doesn't necessarily know anything about the chargers, or they don't know how to fix them or how to work on them, right? So you're relying on our support service that's remote. And if we don't know what's wrong with a unit in person, the last thing you want to have to tell a driver is, I don't know how to help you, or I can't help you.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. I mean, as a CPO, again, if you're only in business if the charger's up and running, and so we do get e-stops pushed, and for a long time that was a big headache to try to, because you just need someone to go and do this on site.
I've reset a couple as an EV driver.
And it's enormously frustrating. I've had favors pulled, and then finally I was like, I need to find a better solution. So we actually went on Thumbtack and found someone, and charges pretty low cost to just go out and do that. But to Dan's point, they have a great service team and they have support, whereas I have other chargers with other vendors, and I have the hardware manufacturer, and I have the CPMS provider. And I had an issue this week where the charger was showing it was in use, even though I could pull up the video camera and see no one was there, so it was like stuck. I emailed customer support. 4 days later, they came back and they said, "Oh no, it looks like the charger's working." I was like, "Well, yeah, because I waited for 3 days and then I sent someone out to the site because you guys didn't respond." And so I think that's been the traditional response in the industry. It's like, oh, we'll get back to you when it's convenient. Whereas the Autel team is good, and I think part of that is you guys have back end visibility where others may not, or you guys actually care, even though if you're looking at. So a lot of it, and I said it in the reliability breakout session this morning, was just you just need vendors to give a damn about high reliability, and I think everyone on the stage obviously does because we're here. But there's a lot of people who haven't in the past, and maybe they've been focused on network expansion, and they've been, oh, we'll worry about reliability once we get expanded. But we're a small company, so we can only compete if we're top reliability. And so we care about that. And I think that's thing number one is just you have to care about reliability.
I was there for that session. I liked that statement because it did feel like a lot of operators for a while, all they cared about was the number in the ground.
Yeah.
And you're like, if they're in the ground and they don't work, who cares? And that's actually worse. Like I'd rather for you not to put it in the ground if you're not going to maintain it because it's just hit or miss. So I appreciate addressing that, and it sort of comes around, full circle a bit too about like we want to focus on the equipment, we want to focus on like these technical aspects, connectivity, and all of that. But a lot of it is just seems like the industry is also evolving and learning that like, hey, number one, we have to care, but number two, like we have to work together. And it seems like Autel is doing a great job working with partners that give a damn and coming up with solutions that fit the customer's needs, that translates all the way down to the EV owner's needs, but caring about maintenance, caring about connectivity, caring about future proofing. So it seems like that's a huge step for the industry. It's like an intangible, but it's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our motto is that we relate to the game because we learned what not to do. So, we've been in the EVSE industry for, about 4 years now. But, Autel as a company is not new. We've been around 21 years now, started in the automotive diagnostic space. And so, we saw all the DC charger reliability issues going on. And we started looking into, okay, what's the reason for a lot of this? And, vehicle or, hardware to hardware communication was kind of what that was our bread and butter. And obviously building the software and our scan tools, all of that from the diagnostic side. And so, we really leveraged all that experience when building all of our EV chargers. And so, vehicle communication protocols, we already knew all of that like the back of our hand. And it was, kind of an easy, no-brainer solution to transition into this industry as well, because we knew that we could fix a lot of the issues that are going on. We do all of our own interop testing in our lab in Anaheim. We do back testing with, new vehicle firmware and stuff too. But then live testing with the vehicles just to make sure that every new vehicle that comes out is going to operate correctly with our chargers. And then that's part of the new firmware that we roll out to our chargers is to support all those new vehicle protocols that are coming out. So there's that. And then obviously the remote diagnostics piece. Then also just building products that are aesthetically pleasing, but also feature rich. So that's why we've got the advertising capabilities on the screen. So we have a lot of configuration options with our products. So if you want cable management, if you don't want it, if you want a credit card reader, if you don't want it, we just try and offer solutions that are applicable to all the potential verticals that are out there.
Now, some of the buzzwords as I've walked around here at EV Charging Summit, and I'll let you guys, if you want to go in a different direction, feel free. But some of them are, of course, like V2G, V2Load, plug and play. I've seen a few people talking about that, including some level 2 plug and play, which is something that's we haven't seen before. You want to talk about any of those buzzwords or your own buzzwords that you've heard here at the show?
Yeah, I think some of that I really like it because it's really playing into the driver experience side of it. Because at the end of the day, that's really where it's going to be the most successful piece of the industry is if the drivers are enjoying it, if it's working well. I say this a lot, but as a previous gas driver, I never wondered if I was going to be able to get gas at a gas station. It was never a thought. With EV driving, years ago, it was one of those like, is this other station going to work? Is it actually operational today? Is it full, right? Some of those questions that people have in their mind now. So, having things like ISO 15118 for the plug and charge, We've developed something with Ford for the Blue Oval network where you can have, your account set up within your vehicle. Everything's already on file. You could just plug in, it reads the MAC ID of the vehicle, and you're charging, which in my opinion is actually even easier than gas. You don't have to hold the nozzle. You just plug in and you're charging. And as a CPO, with the business side, the revenue piece is a big component of it that I think does not get brought up much with the conversation of plug and charge, because you can make any charger plug and charge, right? At the end of the day, but being able to collect the data from it, being able to collect revenue on a session that's plug and charge, that's something that you have to figure out how to do. And being able to make sure that it's obviously secure and that it works correctly, whether it's with pre-authorizations or whatnot, like having all those components, I think it's great. And then on like kind of like the V2G side or stuff like that too, where people talk about like grid stability and how much grid availability there is. We've done some sites where we've used battery buffer solutions where we can't hit the grid for anything 49 kilowatt or basically 50 and above, or we get hit with demand charges. Well, 49 kilowatt charger is not what we want to deploy. So we're able to hit the grid for 49 kilowatts, store all of this energy, and then output it at a much higher rate. And, you don't have to charge a vehicle every day. So maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays are slower days. So you can actually use all of that energy and provide it to the establishment it's at. For us at a C store, I can power all of their fridges and all of their freezers on Thursday because there's more power than than is needed. So stuff like that, I feel like there's a lot of these different components that maybe aren't talked about as much. But as you mentioned, I think one of the most important pieces is we need to make sure everything works first. We need to make sure that the mentality of EV charging is not, is it going to work? Am I going to be able to find one? All of these questions. It's great. EV charging works. It's a great industry. Now we can start to, really further that experience and make it better.
Yeah, I would echo the comments related to plug and charge. And again, just getting it work, getting as close to that Tesla experience as possible. You just plug in and go. I'm very skeptical on vehicle to grid. I've been skeptical for 4 years, and I haven't changed my skepticism because people talk about it. I'm like, great, where is this happening? And they're like, oh, well, there's this one pilot program where we'd use some leafs. And I'm like, great, when was that? Oh, that was like 5 years ago. What have you guys done since? Oh, nothing. So like, it's just a distraction.
It's happening next year, I guarantee it.
Yeah, right. It's like fusion, right? It's the power of the future, and it always will be. But I'm a big fan of vehicle to load, where you just get an extension cord and you plug it into the vehicle. But putting in these chargers, the infrastructure is incredibly hard and expensive. And if you want to do a V2G setup at your house, you're going to spend like 10 grand. So okay, the utility is going to give you like a $100 gift card on your bill, or like I don't know what the plan is because no one has said what the plan is. So I'm very skeptical on V2G, and I could go on my rant forever on that topic.
I know some people that have the F-150 Lightning, and of course, two people that I know went with the like alternate solution just to do it as vehicle to load versus vehicle to grid, because it was like it's so expensive to do vehicle to grid, but vehicle to load, it's sort of like that twice a year when you actually need it. No big deal.
Yeah, as much as I'm like kind of anti or skeptic of vehicle to grid, I'm super pro vehicle to load. In my next EV, we have an e-tron and a Tesla Y. Neither can export power, but we've lost, we live in Georgia, we have pretty reliable power, but once a year you lose power for half a day, and it sure would be nice to keep your fridge running. And so vehicle to load for that application is brilliant and perfect. And I think 95% of EV drivers are served with vehicle to load, and the vehicle to grid is just like, all right, tell me when the utility is going to, pay for the infrastructure, and then sure, I'll put it in.
And we should work offline because, like, I think there's like a business opportunity to sell like the in between solution where it's like a set up little plug in your garage, so you don't have to have the whole big thing. But it's like, hey, we got power out, and we plug it in, and everything.
Or I've thought of like space heater / window AC unit combo, so you have like a unit that just is ready to plug in.
Well, see, this is what this is all about. Like EV charging something, we'll come up with a new business idea on the spot. Well, I guess we got to sort of start wrapping it up. We've talked about a lot of different subjects, where we've been, where we're going. We'll just start down at the end. We'll work our way back down here. If you guys have any like closing thoughts or comments of like what you are most excited about after being here at the EV Charging Summit for the first full day.
Yeah, I think being here last year and again this year, just seeing the amount of advancement year after year within this industry, it's super. It's such a reassuring feeling because being in the early days, feeling like you're one of the very few people that are really trying to push this forward. It's like, okay, like this is how far can we really take this, and being able to partner with groups like Autel and collaborate and really push things together and continue to do that with more and more partners. I think that's really where we're gonna end up getting to really the end goal for everybody of having this be what we want it to be. And being able to collaborate with people at shows like this, and like you mentioned, being able to come up with maybe business ideas, and just sharing those ideas and different perspectives, I think is really critical with being able to further that. I may have experienced something different than you may have, or that you gentlemen may have, and combining those thoughts and combining those perspectives, like thinking of security. Some people might not think of that, and maybe that's like a friendly reminder or a nice refresh. Like, all right, you know what? That really should be something that we talk to our design teams about, and really make sure that that is emphasized, or making sure it's at least a checkbox. Did we even think about this? Did we think about pull through? Did we, all of those different components? I'm really excited to see how much it's advanced. I'm really excited to see how the focus has shifted. Not so much of just putting ports out there, but really making sure that they're reliable, making sure that they are fast chargers and whatnot. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, I would echo that. This is my first year at EVCS, and I've been impressed with the quantity and quality of attendees. So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and it's like everyone who I speak with on LinkedIn is here, and so it's cool to meet them in person and see the amount of brain power that's going into advancing everything. And what Anthony said is that it can get, if you follow the national news media or politics, and there's this like anti-EV sentiment, and then there was this like fake EV mandate that once people were pushing, and I'm glad I think we're past that for a while, and we can just focus on helping people realize that EVs for most people are superior driving experience, and if we can figure out how to charge them consistently and reliably, then we'll be here in 10 years and be celebrating, and talk. Then maybe we'll be talking about V2G
Next year, that'll be the talk. Continue next year.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll second what both of them said. I really think that the driver experience has really proven itself. Anybody who has been anti-EV, and then if they rent one, or they buy one, or they drive their friends, they're like, okay, this is actually way better ride quality, way quieter, and then actually cheaper to operate too, because 80 to 90% of the time you're charging at home, and you're getting it just at your utility rate cost, and it's way cheaper overall to just own and drive a EV every day, especially if you're not going your vehicle's full range. Then a lot of times you don't even need to rely on public fast charging infrastructure. So yeah, I think that the industry or consumers are learning that, and that's just helping boost overall adoption. EV prices are coming down. I think everything's going in the direction that this industry is going to continue expanding. There's obviously negative sentiment all the time, but I think it's really proving itself as a better opportunity, or just better technology in comparison to ICE vehicles. So really happy to continue being a part of this industry, and I think that those that are able to survive the kind of the ups and downs within the market, I think that it's going to continue evolving, continue expanding, and really happy to see where we are 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now. I think it's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think you said 1 year in this industry is like 10 years in other industries. So I'm excited to see where we go in the next year. It's been really great to just day one, seeing like all the buzz and excitement over all the different companies working together, improving the driver experience. And that's what we try to do, is we try to present to our viewers who are just normal EV drivers, are just like, I just want to charge. And in a bathroom while I'm charging would be great. So I appreciate everything that you guys do, and appreciate your time today talking to us about the EV charging landscape now and in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.